If you had $1,000 to invest in gold or silver right now, which one would you do? Silver prices have been falling a bit lately, and gold is still near its all-time highs. But here's exactly what I would do if I had $1,000 today. I'm going to give you an insight of exactly what decisions I would make given the prices and the markets and everything. So let's break everything all down in this video. Want to win 100 ounces of American Silver Eagles completely free? Well, JM Bullion is giving away 5 full tubes of 100 coins packed in a custom waterproof Pelican case. There is no purchase necessary, and the giveaway ends September 11th of this year. And if you want to get in on this opportunity, click the link in the description below to enter for your chance to win. And just to be clear, JM Bullion is not sponsoring this channel in any sort of way. This is me just wanting to pass this opportunity along to help you guys out. So don't miss out on this. Click the link in the description and enter for your chance to win 100 ounces of free silver. Hi everybody, and welcome back to yet another video. So before we get started here, breaking everything down, let's take a look at the markets right now and see how the prices of gold and silver are behaving. Because as of today, on July 15th, we received the inflation data and it went up slightly to 2.7% from last month. So with that being said, now that all the data is out, let's go check into SD Bullion's page and look at the prices and see where everything stands. Again, now that everything has been released. All right, so now that we're here on SD Bullion's page, let's take a look at the performance of gold and silver just in the past week. To start off, since Monday, silver has gone down just a little bit, and gold has done pretty much the same here. But from last week, gold and silver has both done pretty well. But if we look at the year to date, silver has done very well, and also gold has done very well. But if you also look at the 6 months, because I can't find a year to date on this one, but if you look at the 6 months, in the past 6 months, silver has been up 24.98%. And if we go over into gold, it has been up 24.53. So silver has just slightly outbeat gold, but they're pretty much trading 1 for 1 right now in terms of performance. But if we look at the GSR, since its recent high back in April at 104, it has gone down a good amount, down to 88. So we're currently at 88.04 to go into this week. And that's been a recent trend now. Ever since about May going into June, the GSR has really been dropping. So what does this mean for you if you're deciding whether or not to buy gold or silver? Because in my personal opinion, the GSR does play a decent, or if not a important role or factor into my decision making. And I'm going to explain exactly why that is. Okay, so most of us know that the gold to silver ratio, or the GSR, moves depending on the performances of silver and gold relative to each other. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there who do not care for it. They dislike using the GSR as a tool or a reference piece when it comes to buying or selling precious metals. However, I would argue that it is a great barometer for how the market is performing overall, and how it's a great indication tool to decide exactly what you should be buying. Because if I were to get the hypothetical $1,000 to spend, where the GSR is at will be necessary to use, because it will tell you which metal you need to be buying and which one you might want to avoid, or maybe one that you'd want to sell if you're interested in some profits. So let me show you with some proof of exactly what I mean, because I know there's going to be some people out there who are going to discredit the use of it, but I want to show people what the potential can be if you use this method. So if we go back into SD Bullion's page, I'm going to show you the GSR on their highs, its lows, and how the prices of silver and gold were looking like during those highs and lows of the GSR. Okay, so now that we're back on SD Bullion's page, there's a couple things that I want to explain to you guys about, maybe some things that you should remember when we're talking about this stuff. So the gold to silver ratio, how you get the number is divide the price of gold by the price of silver. And essentially what it means is right now it takes 88 ounces of silver at this price to buy 1 ounce of gold at this price. So when we talk about the gold to silver ratio, it's really more so about silver than it is about gold, because even when I explain to you in a bit what this looks like, gold doesn't really do much in terms of its price and performance, because it's really more about how silver reacts. Because again, if you guys remember a second ago, I just mentioned about which metals you should avoid and which ones you should be buying. I think regardless, at any time, realistically, you can buy gold and it's always going to do well for you. I mean, the prices are always going to relatively go up for the most part, but there are some lows and some highs, of course, but it's not as bad as silver is. So when we talk about the GSR, we're really kind of talking about when you should be buying silver and when you should not be buying silver. So when we go back into the GSR, as I said, I want you guys to remember a few things. When it's high at 120, like it was back in 5 years ago, when it's that high, two things are happening. Number one, silver is cheap. And number two, the metals are relatively in a bear market. And when the GSR is low, like it was in 2011, silver is expensive and the precious metals are in a bull market. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So if you guys remember those two dates, we'll start back in 2020. The price of silver hit $12.57, a price we haven't really seen since, around the great financial crisis and even earlier than that. So in 2020, when the GSR was 120 to 1, you could buy silver at $12. If you had bought it back in 2011, when the GSR was around 35, you would have spent about almost $50 an ounce to buy your pieces of silver. And even to this day, you still would not get anywhere really close to getting any of that money back. Again, we're not adjusting for inflation or none of that stuff, but we're just talking nominally here in dollars as it shows on the screen. If you bought back then in 2011, you're still waiting for that profit to show on paper, more or less. So that's what I mean when it says to avoid certain metals. Again, we're really talking about silver. So that's how I decide whether or not I should be buying silver or I should be buying gold. Because again, I personally think you can buy gold at any point in time. But if you're going to buy any precious metals, I personally buy silver when the ratio is above a certain level. And then once it goes down below that level, like if it were to kind of work backwards on this chart here, if it were to drop down in this direction into the 30s, I would stop buying silver, but just buy gold instead. And also possibly even trade in pieces of silver for gold. And again, we can explain that in here in just a little bit, but I want you guys to understand how the GSR works and why it's important to use this as a tool to decide what you should or should not be buying. So what is the correct range, or at what number do you decide to buy silver or gold? I mean, I view it as a barometer for how gold and silver are performing relative to each other. But more importantly, I also use it as a decision-making tool to help me choose which metal to focus on. When the ratio is high, like it is at around 88, that's a signal to me that silver is undervalued compared to gold. And that's when I go all in. On the flip side, when the ratio drops below 60, it typically means that silver has already outperformed gold and it becomes a better value at that point. So I start shifting my focus towards gold. And historically, the GSR has floated somewhere between 60 and 80. So anything above 80, I go all in on silver. Anything below 60, I go all in on gold. And for that in-between zone, between 60 and 80, it's a little more complicated to decide what it is you might want to purchase. And realistically, that can just be a judgment call on your part. But lately, we've seen the GSR been living above that 90 range for the past few years, with some exceptions, but it's finally starting to look like it's coming back down. So with the GSR currently at 88, to me, if you were to give me $1,000 right now, I would buy silver. Not because $1,000 can't buy you a decent weight in gold, other than little fractional pieces. Even if it was $10,000 and I could buy some ounces of gold, I would still buy silver today. Why? Because again, I play the GSR. And yes, having $10,000 worth of silver might be a lot of ounces to deal with, but again, for $1,000, I think that's roughly 25 ounces right now with today's prices, and that just depends on the type of silver that you get. But regardless of the dollar amount, I would still be buying silver at this time. And until the ratio drops further, only then would I begin to switch into gold or even consider trading some of the silver for gold. And that's a little quick, I guess, quote, free way, if you will, to get some gold without having to really, quote, pay for it. But more on that in a second. So there are reasons and benefits to playing or utilizing the GSR method. And to touch on that trading part, if you had bought silver when the GSR was 120, and let's say hypothetically it drops back to that 35 level in just a few years from now, 120 ounces at $12 would have been around $1,400 spent. And if the GSR dropped to that 35 level, you could have traded in most of that silver for 3 ounces of gold at the future pricing of whatever that is. And you would still have 15 ounces of the original silver pieces left over. Now, you don't have to wait for those specific numbers, but you get the math behind it. And it also works in reverse if you trade gold for silver. But I personally wouldn't do that. I think gold is the end game and silver is there to just help you along the way. So that's what I would do if I were to have $1,000 today. I would just buy more silver. And another thing you could think of is, what if you just wait? What would you stack the cash off to the side and wait for something else to happen? I mean, I think doing something with that money is better than doing nothing. But stacking these metals are going to be the best use of your free cash, in my opinion, unless you have some other aspirations like debt reduction or other investment opportunities. But with that being said, guys, what would you do with $1,000? Would you buy gold or silver or something else? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye, guys.